it isn't enough to say, well, how can I control my eating? The question to ask is, why am I actually using food in an inappropriate way? That would be the question I would ask, and I would go back to the Father and ask him to show me. Is there anything I'm believing about food? Is there any mindset that I have towards food, that I'm using food as a material thing to comfort me or to give me something, whatever that is? Some people might use alcohol, some people might use drugs, some people might use other things. Always that all those are symptoms of something deeper. What is the deeper thing? Where is it that you are unhappy, or where there's something that triggers you to eat?
I've been thinking a lot about time, and Mike, how you've worked with time. And I'm sort of feeling like sometimes some of the things that I get myself involved, it takes me forever. So I'm asking, how to engage, what's worked for you in engaging time, and how do you navigate through that? Do you go first into the presence of the Lord, or how exactly do you do that to accomplish more things that really need to be done in a limited amount of time?
Okay, I mean, the first thing I see is there is no limited amount of time. That's the mindset that you have to get over, because if you think there's a limited amount of time, then you will only have a certain amount of time to do the things that you can do. If you believe you can do everything that God calls you to do, irrespective of the time you have appeared available, then you can administrate time to serve you in fulfilling God's purpose. You don't have to be subject to time. Time itself is there to serve you. It's not there to restrict you. So whenever God asks me to do things within the context of, but I don't have that within my diary to add more meetings or do more things and carry on doing what I'm already doing, I had to choice. Do I accept that God wouldn't be asking me if it wasn't possible? Or do I think, well, I can't do this, it's impossible, or I have to change something or get rid of something? My first reaction was, okay, God, yes, whatever it is you want me to do, yes, I'll do it. Then I look at my diary and, okay, I can fit in more meetings, I can do this, but then I can't have time to prepare for preparing PowerPoints or messages or other things. So they would take me, a PowerPoint with 100 slides could take me a couple of days or more to do. So then I chose the reality that I will be able to prepare this PowerPoint in the half an hour that I have available. Now that half an hour becomes an hour, 2 hours, 2 days, whatever it takes for me to fulfill the PowerPoint. My expectation is I will be able to do it. And therefore you can expand and contract time to facilitate you fulfilling the purposes of God. And that's really a choice. And it's a choice of conscious awareness that time serves me. I have the ability as a son of God to expand my half an hour into 2 days if need be. But it's relative, of course, to the person. So it only appears like half an hour to me. But within that half an hour, in reality, I've outworked and produced a PowerPoint, which normally takes me a day or 2 days. So the first issue with time was, time is no restriction. I have authority within time. Time serves me, and therefore I'm not going to allow the mindset of time's against me, I'm running out of time, I don't have any time, there isn't enough time. All those negative statements you have to begin to take captive and not speak. Time itself is also a being, and the being of time is also wanting to help us realize that that being is for us and not against us, and is there to serve us and to help us facilitate whatever it is that God's calling us to do. Within the broader perspective, my mindset is I always have everything that I need to fulfill what God's calling me to do. So from that perspective, I have insight, revelation, whatever I need, time, finances, whatever it might be, that is available to me, because that is what I live in the reality of. That is my conscious reality. God's provision is there for me in every way to enable me to fulfill whatever God's called me to do. So I don't see time as a negative. I don't see time as being against me or running out or any negative statement that I used to make and other people do make about time. I don't make anymore. I see that I can do whatever I'm called to do. But I must make sure that I'm not doing stuff what I'm not called to do. Sometimes people can put pressure on us to do things that God doesn't want us to do. And therefore, if we're doing something that we're not called to do, then we need to consider stop doing that to free up some of the practical time that we actually do have. And also, the more you can do in the realms of heaven in a non-cognitive way, the easier it is to enjoy life on earth without being pressured and be at rest, not working hard to try and do something to fulfill some obligation or duty, but feeling free to enjoy life and doing most of what you need to do as a son in the spirit realm, multidimensionally, without affecting the natural realm. Now, there are obviously things I'm doing like this and the mentoring sessions I do and the Patreon teaching thing I did last night, all those things. Yeah, I do them in real time because I'm connecting with people also in real time. But I also can choose at points to not be constricted by that mindset and be free to expand a moment. And the longest I ever expanded a moment into, I think, was 3 or 4 months. And I did 3 or 4 months of ministry into the angelic realm, and then came back at that same moment as if that moment had never happened other than that moment. And I remembered the 3 or 4 months of stuff I'd done, but it was only a moment of time, because every moment of time contains every moment of time potentially. It's only our own restricting of thinking of past, present, future that limits, oh, that's gone. If I live in this moment, I can choose to expand that moment to 3 months and come back to that moment as if no time had passed and had 3 months worth of activity or whatever I need. And that was, I think, the longest time I ever needed to do something. And I had the memory of what I did. Now, sometimes I don't need the memory of what I've done because it'll be there if I ever do need it, but I don't always need to fully remember everything I've done. So I live in that sort of type of moment of expanding time and thinking about the reality of choosing the realities. And, you know, sometimes I've contracted time. So I needed something done in a, you know, I needed to get somewhere. So I've contracted the hour into 5 minutes and got there in time, all that sort of stuff. It really comes down to, can you choose that sort of reality without being double-minded? Because if you're in doubt or unbelief or double-minded, it just won't work. You have to have authority and know it and use it in that way. And it isn't an opportunity to waste time. Oh, great, I can expand this so I can just waste my time doing nothing. Not that doing nothing is a bad thing sometimes. You know, being at rest and enjoying that sort of abundance of life is good. But it's making sure that our lives are in that state where we're living at rest and we're not striving in that way. So time really is a thing. I don't believe that there is a fixed future. So I believe the future is there for us to walk into and choose to create. And then it becomes history once we've established it. I don't think there's a fixed future that's already existing, because then my choice is taken away, because I can't choose. If it's always going to be that way, then I can't choose to be involved, or if I am or not, you know, and that sort of thing. So I don't think a fixed future exists, but I do think God lives outside of time and space within the eternal realm, and therefore everything is now, and therefore things are continually being adapted and outworked to enable God's desire for the future to be fulfilled. But he gives us the responsibility to do that creatively through us, which means we're not having to do it one fixed way, but in a creative sense. We can choose how we do what God's calling us to do. And that involves also choosing the time we take to do it and when we take the time to do it by choice, rather than by being forced by time constraints and being forced by deadlines and being forced by a mindset that says I am being controlled by either time as a concept or other people's pressurizing me to do certain things. So you've got to be in that place of rest, and then everything flows out of that place of rest, really, when it comes to time.
That's interesting. A lot to absorb there. Actually, I think my initial gate blocker is that negative, obviously that negative aspect. You see the train coming down the track, you got to be there at 10 o'clock, you got to have all your slides prepared and etc. But yeah, I'll start working on that one first. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, and there have been times when I've had to get someone to a train station and things were running late or there was unexpected delays, and I had to choose the reality that we're going to be 10 miles in 2 minutes, because there was no practical way of actually doing anything different. And I have done that, and we were there, and it sort of is a bit like a blur, and all of a sudden you're there. Well, how did I get here? It's like, but you are, and sometimes that's what happens. I've driven around a corner and I've been somewhere else. Well, I didn't really necessarily choose even to do that, but it happened, and that gave me the confidence that then if I did choose to do that, it could happen again in that way. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. All right.
Mike, I was wanting to know if you have ever engaged with the ambassador of the ages in the heavenlies, and if so, what does he what does he represent? What type of help does he bring to us?
There are more than one ambassador to the ages, because there are more than one age. So what the Father showed me, within the context of the wheels within the wheels within the wheels, you have the external physical realm of the cosmos, which is rotating around, and we are moving within what we call the Mazzaroth, or the 12 houses of heaven, at a rate of one house every 2,000 odd years. Now that's a very, very slow period that none of us have ever experienced much more than one of those houses, unless we're in the transition period. But then there's an inner wheel, the circle of the deep, which is where the 12 chancellors' houses are also moving, and we can then administrate within the 12 chancellors' houses for what's going on in the outer sphere to be, it's not exactly speeded up, because you can't speed up the heavens, but we're not controlled by it. I am not going to be controlled by living in this time of Aries, waiting for a time of Aquarius. Because actually, if I administrate the time of Aquarius around my life, I'll see things poured out, a blessing on my life, even though we might not be physically in that age. So I'm going to, again, my mindset is choosing not to be controlled by external circumstances, but to be administrating that. Now, the inner wheel is what the Father called the 12 ages of man, and they were the 12 ambassadors of those ages that are like the 12 chancellors, high chancellors. They are involved in particular ages of man. Now, what are those ages? How long do they last? Well, I don't know. And whether they are simultaneous, overlapping, I don't know, because I've not had any course to really engage it at that level at this point in time. But I have seen them and met them in one sense, and I'm aware that there are ways in which when you revolve one thing, you move the other thing and the other thing. So the three wheels are interactive and interconnected. So we do something within our age, but we can also have the age to come present in our age. Because it's not something that should be seen as a restriction, but something which should be seen as an opportunity, So I want the discoveries which are for this age, which may come from a future age, released into this age. Or, there's all sorts of ways of looking at it. But an ambassador represents an age to something else. So I believe these 12 ambassadors represent their ages to each other and to us, so that we're not having to sort of, oh no, I'm in age 1, I've got to wait till age 12, or will we ever get there? I'm going to be dead, or whatever. There's got to be sort of a view that all this works within the context of our lives, within the context of what God is doing and God's purposes, that we can begin to say God gives us insight and understanding as sons to be able to administrate things. So again, I'm not sure that we're talking about physical ages like, oh, well, the Stone Age or the Bronze Age or the Iron Age or the Industrial Age. I don't think it's quite like that. I think it's more about maturity. So these are ages of the maturity of man that are about bringing man into the fullness of the 12 firestones. So I think there's a link there to the firestones as well, which is about the maturing of sonship into government and into the fullness of our creative identity. So again, I think there are things we can draw into our life from a particular age or a particular stage of maturity that I need to be able to administrate something today. And the ambassadors of those ages seem to have a role to represent that age to us. Then you've got to sort of figure that also then tying to the circle of the deep and the 12 chancellors' houses and how they relate as a sequence to bring us into a precept of God. Now, I feel that the precepts of God, which are in a sense a revelation of some aspect of his character or essence or nature, are tied to our maturity, but we can have a precept of God which then changes our mind, the statutes and the laws and the ordinances in a cycle. And maybe we can have a precept of God which is designed in one of the 12 ages of man to come into the age that I'm now in maturity, to mature me to another age, revelation of precepts, if you like. And I think it's all about the revelation of who God is, which brings us revelation of who we are, and that maturity level, which I think is to do what the ages are about, rather than the church age, the kingdom age. That's not really what they're about. It's not that type of time scale, but a more of a maturity of identity, of sonship. And ultimately, we want to be fully mature, fully functioning in every level of sonship, fully seated in the realms of heaven to the highest level that we are called to occupy. So from that perspective, I think it's more revelation of God, which brings revelation of who we are, which brings about revelation of our authority and our position to administrate this level of maturity that I have, and not be operating outside of the maturity level and therefore doing things that I don't have the maturity to do. So there's wisdom needed within these contexts to say, I feel led into this area, but I don't feel I have the wisdom or the understanding or insight to enable me to fulfill this area. So I'm going to engage with the house of precepts, perhaps in the realms of the heaven and the circle of the deep, to see if there's a revelation of something within the precept of God, which will bring about a maturing of my understanding of who God is, and therefore my role within the kingdom in that area. So we can be proactive about it. We don't just have to be sitting waiting for something to cycle me, which happened in my life with the angels that were assigned to me and guarding my throne in the realms of heaven. Did administrate the circle of the deep a number of times to cycle me around, to change, to bring me into a greater state of maturity. But then I learned that I can engage there if I feel I need something. And I remember when Father asked me to do some court cases in in the Council of 70, I felt completely out of my depth and completely unaware of how to do it. And I went through a quite quick process of maturity in that area. And something of the precept of God regarding judgment, justice, grace, mercy revealed to me a whole dimension of how to administrate this court case for the Joshua generation, where before I had those encounters that brought about that understanding of God's precepts towards, judgment, justice, grace, mercy, that I would have been able to do. And I engaged the firestones, and I engaged things which brought about a great change in my understanding and experience of God at that level. Then I felt equipped to go in and do what he called me to do. So I think his self-awareness is important in knowing, well, where am I? And not just hoping for the best and plowing in. Because God may say, I want you to do this, and he knows you're not ready to do it. So therefore, there's going to be a process that makes you to become ready to do it. And I think it's always looking out for those cycles and embracing them and engaging them to facilitate that renewing of our mind and our deconstruction, if that's part of it, or just wisdom and insight and imparted, infused knowledge of the Father's heart sometimes can take place.
That's what I felt like happened when I engaged the ambassador in heaven. Number one, I felt like he was helping me to understand administration, just like you said. And then I felt to go to the earth shield, and I felt him go with me. And I sensed that he was helping me to administrate in a deeper way the earth shield and a greater understanding. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I think all of these things are there to help us. They're there not to hinder us. They're there to help us. And you just go with the flow of it. Don't try and be over analytical of it. And then once you have the experience, then you can, that experience can then be there as the foundation for future experiences in that process yourself. So
one, I had an encounter recently where it wasn't anything at all I planned, but I was out in the cosmos, and God just began out of my being to bring me, if you will, one version of myself after another, after another, after another, where there were multiplied Dan Newmans, my goodness, for better or for worse, that were out there in the cosmos. And as I seemed to sense, I was engaged in multiplied means of ministry, both to the cosmos as well as to the earth, in many multiplied versions of myself. Then after that, again, I was out in the cosmos, and I'll use the word because it's the best way I know to describe it, and I got the word from you, Mike. I was spaghettified, which I don't know what that means, but I seem to be like my atomic structure, or whatever, cellular structure, was just all over the universe, perhaps beyond. I don't know. It was beautiful. It seemed like I was in touch with wherever I was, which was kind of everywhere. And so that's what I experienced.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I've had a number of sort of spaghettified experiences where it felt like my whole being was just connected to the whole of creation. And I felt a union at that level, which was almost like a subatomic particle level of the smallest particles of me connecting with everything. And they were quite life-changing experience in that they gave me an insight into creation, how it was feeling, the groan of creation, and my role in bringing about creation's restoration. So it's definitely a part of connecting at a level which is beyond just the mind, or when you're just one being, And I think there's a sense where that union was always designed for us to be connected. When it comes to multidimensional Dans, I don't think there's many versions of you, just one version of you able to operate in multidimensional realities. So it's probably an illustration of the fact that you're not limited to one dimension or two dimensions, but you can be in multiple dimensions, doing multiple things, actually. So being multidimensional actually was the thing which really turbocharged my ability and realized that I didn't have to be linear in my approach. So I didn't have to do A, B, C, D, E to get to F. I could be in A, B, C, D, E at the same time, facilitating for F to be produced or revealed. So that was very helpful because it meant I was connected to multiple streams of multidimensional expression, reality, working in all of them and benefiting from all of them without having to consciously or cognitively always be there and act. So it freed me, in a sense, again, to be unlimited in my perspective. Whereas, I learned to engage those things in heaven one at a time, and then start to put one or two of them together into patterns of ministry and things I could do. And then I realized that some of these experiences, 7 or 8 different things, all function in this one sphere, but all need to function together, not linearly. So an example would be, if I go into the 4 faces of God and I'm standing in the name of God and I have access to the eternal heart of God, what do I do with that? Well, I administrate that on my mountain. I might administrate that in the courts of heaven. I might administrate it in the chancellor's court. I might be needing to do multiple things with what I have or are experiencing. So I realized that I could be doing all of those things at the same time. Not I go to there, I get a mandate here, then I go there, then I do this, then I go there, then I sit on my throne and I administrate and I legislate. I can be legislating and administrating all the time, and I can be in the courts all the time, and I can be in the 4 faces of God all the time, and I can be connected with the lion, ox, evil man. I can be in the eternal heart of God all the time. So that's multi-dimensional reality, and that's one sort of sphere. Then another sphere, I can be in other sort of spheres of government and authority as well. And there were a number of them. I could be engaged with the heart of God, and I can be in a dimension or multiple dimensions, and I can be engaged in those dimensions in restoring some of the beings in those dimensions or engaging those dimensions. I don't have to now, okay, I'm going to go here, then I'm going to go there, then I'm going to go and do this, and I'm going to get ready to do this, and then I'll do it. I can be all of those things in one moment, if you like, of reality. And then I'm so much freer here to enjoy life here and to do things in this realm, because if we don't earth this out in this realm in some way, then it just becomes spiritual stuff that doesn't seem to have any grounding. So my involvement in the earth shield, which also is connected to my involvement with the north, south, east, west gate, is connected to my involvement with the chancellor's houses. All of that operates as a sphere that enables me to administrate in the earth shield, being involved in the cosmos and the planets and all of that. I don't have to do it linearly. No, I did it linearly, and I went to those places and I experienced those places, but now I can be connected and engaged all the time in that reality. So you seeing multiple Dans is probably an analogy to you can do multiple things at the same time, living in a multi-dimensional reality, not limited by linear time thinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Question number 2. I recently, some weeks ago, let's say, I felt the Lord speaking to me to go on a 7-day water fast. So I started on that, and day 1, 2, and 3 were good, but it was on day 3 where I interrupted the fast and ate a meal in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Then I did not eat until the next day, which would have been the fourth day, about that same time. Then the next day, the fifth day, it was downhill from there. I just ate. I ate. So anyhow, after that, I went to my general practitioner, my doctor, and they took some blood, and then they came back in the room and said that you have diabetes too. Okay. And I've been going through a number of physical kinds of things for a number of months. So that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back as such. And I attempt to be pretty honest with myself. And that is, I know I have been unable, even though I have the power of God, etc., to discipline myself as to my diet and food consumption. And so therefore I, over many years, gained weight, and perhaps a number of the conditions that I have are as a result. So I kind of, out of do or die as such, I determined to go on a 7-day water fast. And I was hoping that through the same, if I was successful, I would gain the momentum as well as the motivation to really significantly make changes, particularly as far as diet and that kind of thing. You know, I'm 71 years old. I don't want to live such poor quality of life year after year that would not enable me to function like I need to, enjoy life, my family, etc. So I went out on the 7-day fast, and I did very well. Essentially, for 7 days, I ate no solid food. I lost approximately 15, 16 pounds in about 7 days, if you can imagine. And I, in my mind, was hoping that I had gained the momentum, like I said, the motivation. I mean, I had a team of people that I contacted that were more or less to work with me kind of in an accountability way, and also me getting direction as far as diet, that kind of thing. However, unfortunately, after the fast, actually the fast ended the day before Thanksgiving, which in this country, you're probably aware, Mike, is a big meal on Thanksgiving, and I partook and kept partaking. And I gained most of the weight back in a short period of time. And so that's where I'm at. You know, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. I can do all things through Christ, and I can go on telling you what the Bible says. But I'm going to also say, Dan Newman, unfortunately, again, even though Christ is in my life, that's an area that I've not been able to discipline myself in, etc. And so any thoughts on how I can perhaps do a lot better? You know, I wish I could just determine, I'm going to discipline myself through the Lord, and I'm not going to overeat and blah, blah, but that doesn't seem to work too well.
Okay.
Similar.
Well, in a sense, there's a couple of different things there. Fasting in itself, you know, I would never do a fast unless I felt God asked me to do it. And even in that, there's different sorts of fasts. So obviously there's a Daniel fast, in fact, where you're sort of not eating certain things, but you're just keeping. And if, to be honest, you've got to be careful. If you've been diagnosed with diabetes, you've got to be very careful with your blood sugar. If you're looking for healing from that, or you believe you can be healed from it, you have to manage that, and don't be blasé about it, because ultimately, you know, if your blood sugar drops to such a degree, you're going to go into a coma. You know, so you've got to be careful medically around certain things, not to make assumptions and just go off and do something unless it's very clear that God's directing you into that. When it comes to eating, you gotta go beyond the symptom of trying to discipline yourself.
Well, just quickly, if I can respond, Mike.
Yeah.
I had a nurse, professional, kind of as a consult during the water fast that I went on when I lost the weight, and you know, she was giving me advice and direction, and I'd done some research, and there's a lot of literature out there now that indicates you can reverse conditions like diabetes and high
Yeah,
blood,
absolutely.
etc.,
Right.
through
Totally.
water fasts. And so that's what I was hoping.
Yeah.
Now, in view of the fact that I gained all the weight back, I just decided, hey, let's not act crazy. And so I went back on my medication because I had stopped taking medication for high blood and cholesterol. The medication I was directed to get, which was a machine to test my blood daily, my blood sugar level, I haven't gotten yet. I have not gotten the medication that they directed me to get, and I'm not determined yet that I will. But I mean, I understand what you're saying as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've no problem with seeing healing and health and wholeness. I believe
can't
in
hear you
totally health and wholeness. So no issue with that whatsoever. It's just how you get there. You just need to be very clear you're following the directions God gives you in doing it, and not just doing something you feel. And you do the research, and that's fine. When it comes to eating it per se, eating is a symptom of something else.
But my greater question is, how can I overcome, Mike?
Well, yeah, but you can't just overcome the eating if there's a deeper root to why you're eating. I mean, on a fast, in a 7-day water fast, if you lost 14, 15 pounds, most of that is going to be water. You'll just be getting water will be coming out of your cells, and you'll probably end up slightly dehydrated. And you put some of the weight on anyway, just because it's water. It's not all, you're not going to burn 15 pounds of fat in 7 days in reality, but you can lose weight, and some of it can be water. And therefore you have to sort of realize that some of it is just, temporary. But when it comes to eating too much or overeating, it's why. What is behind that? That's the key. What are you using food for? Comfort? What are you comforting yourself about? Some of it is not just the eating. Eating is just a symptom. Why? And what is the root of why you feel the need to eat and overeat and eat too much? I understand food is nice and food is good. And obviously Jesus ate a lot, and so there wasn't a problem with eating per se. But overeating to put on extra weight, which puts a strain on all of your body, is obviously something which is not healthy. But why do you do it? It isn't enough to say, well, how can I control my eating? The question to ask is, why am I actually using food in an inappropriate way? That would be the question I would ask, and I would going back to the Father and ask him to show me. Is there anything I'm believing about food? Is there any mindset that I have towards food, that I'm using food as a material thing to comfort me or to give me something, whatever that is? Some people might use alcohol, some people might use drugs, some people might use other things. All those are symptoms of something deeper. What is the deeper thing? Where is it that you are unhappy, or where there's something that triggers you to eat? And so by saying, well, how can I overcome the eating? It's not the issue. It's why I'm eating. Once you identify why and you deal with the why, then the eating will deal with itself, and so, you can do a live bust on eating. You can do going and engaging God around eating, or around the symptoms of why, what's behind it. Go and find out, from the Father, what is the root cause of this issue in your life. Otherwise you just continue to try and, deal with the fruit of the issue and keep cutting it back and whatever and pruning it. And all you do is you just make it get stronger effectively when you prune a plant. So you got to dig the roots out. What's the root of this? Why is the root there? And that will give you some insight into how to overcome the issue, because that issue will be overcome by dealing with the root. And a lot of people have lots of different coping mechanisms or mechanisms they use to make themselves feel better, happier, and most of them have long-term consequences which are not so good, because ultimately you're trying to deal with what is probably a spiritual issue with a material thing, which is only going to be ever temporary. The problem with with eating is obviously it's a normal, natural, everyday thing. It's not like sticking heroin in your arm, which you know is not something that is a normal, everyday thing. So there's nothing wrong in eating. Eating, we're designed to digest food and to eat. So, and that's where the issue comes, because you're not sort of saying, well, this is wrong, you know, but it's the reason you're using the food in that way, which is what you need to uncover and find out. And God can show you, obviously.
Mike, may I interject?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I've been in this cycle and situation myself for a long time, Dan, and the information out there can get quite confusing. One saying to eat this, one saying eat that, and I finally, after a long process and listening to Mike's teachings and realizing that a lot of it is a mindset and a belief system of that I am already healed, and dealing with stewardship of my body and learning how to eat, doing it in partnership with God. And that's where I kept getting hung up, because I'm working through being an independent sort of gal. And so I would, I did the fasting, but all it did, like Mike, it strengthened my will. It was will worship, strengthening and so when I started learning to get before God with it, and I just said, show me how you require me to eat. And he did lead me to boys that had overcome the type 1 diabetes with this way of eating. And the book's called Mastering Diabetes. And it's basically, their scientific approach to it and view was the fat that we're taking in is what's causing all the havoc. They didn't even say it was the sugar. I mean, they have, they basically have you eating fruit, vegetables, healthy grains. You can eat all the fruit you want when you're lowering the fat, when you're watching your fat content. And these guys made a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And because I had a dream one time years ago, and I was on this bus, and I heard the Holy Spirit say to me on that bus, fat is what's making you fat. And so I put all of this together with the Father. Father kept telling me, do this in partnership with me, Jackie. Don't do it separate. I've been dealing with this for 20 years, type 2 diabetes. And it's very challenging, but I have come to peace with this diet of the low-fat diet. I eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit, not a lot of fruit. I used to probably eat more, but I eat fruit. It's not perfected. I'm still at the beginning of it, but I am learning to respect my body and honor my body and steward my body. And I've had to uncover a lot of roots. The love of eating, the lust of eating, and being a woman, I have a husband, and so I have to cook for him, and I have grandchildren I watch, and I have to cook separate meals for them. But I stay on the program that God designed for me. So I just encourage you, Dan, just to continue your partnership with God in this journey. He will show you what is best for you. And, it all comes down to our stewardship. And Mike said when we, went on the government, that it was important for us to deal with these triggers and issues in our life, stewardships, whether it was our bodies, our time, or, whatever it was. And so, but God has helped me. I'm still at the beginning of the journey, I feel, but getting this diet in place, knowing what I'm going to eat, not having to, go for the comfort foods or the craving foods or the, and it's really quite simple how it's all worked for me. It's not as complicated as, if you start piling in all the information, it's going to get real complicated. But just getting before God and letting letting, like Mike said, uncover these root issues of what, and I still have my triggers, but I catch myself now. Oh, I'm getting into stress. Now I want to go grab for the sugar, for whatever reason, So anyway, I hope that helps. Hopefully one day I'll be able to express this a little more clearer, but I have more hope in partnering with God in doing this and dealing with it for so long. The diabetes message really wants to press you down, make you hopeless, agree with their agenda of it. And I just simply refuse. No, I'm whole, well, and healed. I am doing what I know to do right before God. I am partnering with him, and I'm staying in peace and rest. And it's, food's not, I try to keep it not my focus, even though I have to prepare so much of it all the time. It's a heart issue. It's more and more I'm getting farther away from it being, I eat to live, not live to eat, sort of thing. So I hope that helps, Dan.
Absolutely. I appreciate both of you sharing. And so I shall go forward in such light. Thank you much.
I did have another question, Mike. When you're dealing with people that you know that there are soul ties that are, especially in relationships that are creating, the trauma, the upsets, what authority do I have? In the past, I would cut off the soul tie from the person, but I'm still dealing with, oh no, that's their will. That's their, they have to choose to do that. So can you help me to understand?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. In a sense, people who are connected to us relationally in a negative way, we have the authority to be able to sever the ties that are connecting them to us by disengaging from them, so they're not affecting us in that negative way. If we have done something to connect with them, then obviously we have to undo what we've done. And that might just be a matter of renouncing the connection or severing the tie in the spirit, whatever else. When it comes to soul ties in general, obviously you do want to be tied and connected in the right way to God, and obviously to your partner, a husband, or whatever. So there's a sense where you need your soul to be connected to the right people in the right way. And in sense, soul ties in that way are not bad things. They're just connections that we make emotionally with each other, which facilitate communication and relationship. But when it comes to soul ties that are negative or abusive or whatever, again, it's dealing with the history, choosing to forgive and release the person. What you can't do, obviously, is control the person to change or be different. You can't make them be different. That's their choice. So there's a sense where they do need to be cooperating in a process. If you're looking to restore a relationship or to put a relationship on a better footing with someone, there's got to be a cooperation in that with the person you're doing it. And if they're seeking to control you, then that's quite difficult. There are also codependent relationships in which the ties are formed because there's a mutually beneficial thing in that relationship, which can sometimes are very unhealthy. It's like someone who's in great need can easily have a connection to someone who needs to be needed and needs to help, and that forms this relationship where someone needs the help, someone needs to be giving help, and they sort of mutually massage each other's needs, and that's unhealthy. Codependent relationships are unhealthy. So again, it's finding out what is the nature of the relationship, ensuring that you're not controlled by anyone in a relationship, and that you're free to be able to communicate in that relationship what it needs for it to be healthy. And sometimes you just can't be in a relationship with someone in that way who refuses to live in a healthy way with you, in a healthy relationship with you. It's just, but what you can't do is legislate for that person to be the person you want them to be, or to be acting the way you want them to act, because you can't control them. But if it's a relationship that has a measure of connection, then you can absolutely talk through the issues and see if the issues can be resolved in a culture of honor, where you're not pointing the finger and blaming someone, but you're looking to identify the problem in the relationship, and then in that relationship you're looking to put the things right together. Well, that requires cooperation, and you don't always get it from people when the relationship is not so well, or toxic, or in any other type of thing.
What about if it's a relationship, it's not necessarily me being soul tied, but I see it other situations, other people soul tied that I want to, go father.
Again, I just don't think you can't make somebody or other people break their soul ties or disconnect their soul ties unless they're willing, and that requires participation from them to be willing to identify the fact that they have soul ties in the first place, and that those soul ties are negative, and that does become a very difficult scenario when you're trying to help somebody else or two other people in that way, which can become quite messy, trying to get in the middle of someone's relational issues. If they're both asking you for help, then you can mediate in that. But again, they both have to cooperate and be willing to identify with that, which is not always easy.